One must not flirt with one's destiny.
Stop it! You're ignorant.
I didn't expect to talk about one battle after another again, but here we are. I recently listened to a great podcast about the film by rap game Edward Bernays, who's a infamous Twitter provocateur, very smart guy, talented guy, a filmmaker, podcaster, shitposter, and he talked a lot about Thomas Pynchon's book Vineland, on which One Battle After Another is based on. I didn't read Vineland, but when I heard that Vineland mentioned COINTELPRO and all those ops against leftists and revolutionaries, it got me thinking. Because apparently Paul Thomas Anderson took a lot from the book, but not that part. And that's meaningful, because it is one of the more interesting things about the novel and one of the most interesting aspects of the rise and fall of the counterculture of the 60s. All kinds of activists were targeted by those illegal FBI operations in order to sabotage them, especially people like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, the Black Panthers were targeted, and don't forget Fred Hampton was murdered too, among others. Those kinds of operations drove actress Jean Seberg to suicide, because she was a financial supporter of the Black Panthers. Look up her story, it's tragic. And of course, Assata Shakur was one of the targeted individuals. I already mentioned her in the podcast in the first episode that I did. Her life story at least inspired some of the stuff in the film, especially the character of Perfidia Beverly Hills, played by Tiana Taylor. Both of them black revolutionaries, both of them involved in the killing of a policeman or a guard. But while Assata Shakur was a serious, committed activist, Perfidia is a pretty superficial, even narcissistic adrenaline junkie, in it only for the kicks. Now, I don't want to repeat myself, but I'd like to highlight the Psyop aspect of the film. And I'm not saying this film is necessarily a deliberate Psyop, made solely for the purpose of bad-mouthing historical figures or revolutionary ideas. It might as well be a cultural thing. Nobody in Hollywood would pay to realize a truthful or nuanced depiction of Assata Shakur's life. But what if Paul Thomas Anderson had wanted to make such a film? Would he have gotten the opportunity by Warner Brothers? I think that's an interesting question, because they really just threw money at him, and not only them. Some people online have pointed out that it's no secret that PTA was basically sponsored by studio head Michael DeLuca, who knew him right from the beginning and who supported him throughout his career. I can't imagine DeLuca being the only factor, though. But PTA apparently was good at playing the Hollywood game, and he worked with lots of powerful people, making The Master for the Weinstein Company, for example. The point is, none of his films are really daring or controversial in the end. Even The Master, which referenced Scientology and its founder, L. Ron Hubbard, it may have been inspired by Hubbard, but still it was different enough. Also, PTA was very conscious not to insult Scientology, believe it or not. Here's an excerpt from a Guardian article quoting him. "The last thing I want to do is insult someone and their belief system. That's not my bag at all. And the impression people seem to have is that if you do something about Scientology, then it must obviously be an attack, when something like South Park can do that way better than I ever could. I knew we were trafficking in elements that were very delicate. Phil's, meaning Philip Seymour Hoffman, worked with Tom Cruise, and so have I. And the screening was a way of reaching out and saying, I have nothing to hide and no axe to grind. It was done out of respect more than fear. Cruise, it was reported, objected to various aspects of the film, although Anderson insists that they parted as friends. But look, he adds warily, The Master really isn't about the current state of Scientology at all. Instead, it takes its lead from the ideas expressed in Hubbard's 1950 book Dianetics. And the ideas in Dianetics are fucking beautiful. The idea of recalling past lives is so hopeful, so optimistic, and it's something I would love to go along with." Here's another good one. "We're living in an age when if someone gets a whiff of what you're doing, It gets speculated about more than anticipated. When you hear that chatter, it can get mildly frustrating. But now it seems that people are seeing the film and realizing it isn't about Scientology. The biggest challenge is getting good material and to have more good days than bad days. It's a miracle these things get made. It doesn't get easier. Each film has its own set of challenges. Scientology was the least of our problems. Wow. Now this is some real Chamberlain appeasement shit. Yeah, don't insult anyone, least of all your buddy Tom Cruise. Remember Benicio del Toro's line in One Battle After Another? No fear, like Tom fucking Cruise. Can you be possibly more of a bootlicker? Can you be more desperate? Can you be more begging? Have some self-respect. PTA wouldn't shit on a human trafficking cult that has its own secret service because he still wants to be friends with Tom fucking Cruise, who is the hardest working man in Hollywood. Here's another nice PTA quote from the BAFTAs. It's from last week, I think. I'm not a politician, I'm a filmmaker. I try to do it through the work. I'm just a filmmaker, meaning I'm just a court jester. The Scientology flick is not about Scientology. The film about revolutionaries is not about revolutionaries. It's a chase picture with some valuable advice from Homeland Security, strictly for realism. Yeah, and shout out to Rap Game Ed Bernays for pointing out the Golden Globes thing. You know, a woman was killed in cold blood by ICE a couple of days earlier, and One Battle After Another wins 4 Golden Globes. The film that supposedly depicts a quasi-fascist regime with a military force kinda modeled on ICE. And not one of those people said anything in their speeches about that. Nothing about ICE, nothing about the dead woman Renee Good, nothing about politics in general. Now that is very telling. You see, this is just a movie. This is $200 million worth of distraction and entertainment, performative politics, and misinformation. It looks and feels like a film about important issues, but it's a very tame film, because PTA is a coward and he just wants to stay in the game, stay in the club, and enjoy his fake award. You all should really look into the Golden Globes and who pulls the strings behind the scenes. It's wild. Here's one little ditty from the last Golden Globes. MRC has a stake in A24. MRC also has a joint venture with Penske Media, which owns the Golden Globes. Marty Supreme is an A24 film. It was nominated for 3 Golden Globes and won 1. This is how the Golden Globes operate. They basically gave the award to themselves. This is how a lot of award shows operate. But hey, Mark Ruffalo wore the Be Good pin. That's all that counts, right? Performative politics, which is just a substitute for real activism. The same thing that One Battle After Another engages in. I had this thought that maybe PTA wanted to integrate COINTELPRO into the script, but then he would lose the support of Homeland Security or the military or whatever government entity is involved in this film. Because Jim Reiterman is a spook. I talked about it in the first episode. He plays some kind of an ICE agent or military person. And he's very dignified. He's no caricature, unlike Sean Penn's Lockjaw. No, he's a pro. And I think his presence in this film indicates more than just good casting or a sense of realism by casting a real agent. Maybe his presence in this film is an indicator why there's no mention of COINTELPRO activity or activity similar to that, because the revolutionaries in this film brought it all upon themselves. So why complicate matters by telling a story that is actually grounded in reality? Again, I don't want to see a Hollywood film necessarily celebrating Assata Shakur per se or celebrating the Black Panthers. They wouldn't do that anyway. But if you're really out to make a nuanced portrait, you have to involve reality at some point. You have to take history into the account. History is nuanced and uncomfortable. And PTA was only interested in reality while showing his fictional military or ICE agents doing their thing. The revolutionaries, however, are his brainchild alone. It reminds me of the recent Hollywood film on Fred Hampton's death, Judas and the Black Messiah, by Shaka King from 2021. Now, compared to One Battle After Another, this film is a masterpiece, regarding the politics at least. And it does have its moments, but it's the choices you make. You could have made a Fred Hampton biopic. Instead, the filmmakers chose to concentrate on the FBI informant William O'Neill, played by Lakeith Stanfield, because in the end, the revolutionaries brought it all upon themselves. I mean, sure, the FBI is very clearly the villain in this film, but in the end, it's O'Neill's story, and Hampton is the supporting lead. The original writers tried selling the film as The Conformist meets The Departed. So you see, it's a pitch that referenced two classic movies, because it's a tough sell. Hollywood doesn't want to tell the story of Fred Hampton, but it wants to make the all-black The Departed and win some Oscars. So they pitched it as a genre picture, because the film wouldn't get made otherwise. So it basically got compromised in the beginning. And the main character in the film, O'Neill, he's an apolitical guy who basically has no inner life. I mean, they try to convey it all in Stanfield's guilty gaze, but he's not a good enough actor to justify that decision, in my opinion. So why make him the protagonist and not the charismatic activist Hampton? Also, the casting is kind of a problem, because it distorts the historical reality. O'Neill, the informant, was 18. 18 when the FBI caught him, and 19 when they offered him a deal to infiltrate the Black Panthers. Stanfield, the actor who played O'Neill, was 29 or 30 when he made the film. He was an adult. I think there's a different psychology at play when you get blackmailed, by the government as an 18-year-old man, practically a teenager. The same goes for Daniel Kaluuya, who was in his early 30s during the shoot, and Fred Hampton got shot at 21. These casting decisions really mess with the film. I know the film probably wouldn't have been made if they used more suitable but unknown actors, and those two probably got the film greenlit. And they're both good actors. But showing a 19-year-old infiltrator, a young guy who was basically manipulated and blackmailed into the whole thing, would have really highlighted the weaponization of black people against their own by the FBI and by the government. So there are all kinds of obstacles when you want to deal with political topics in Hollywood. First, you have to get rid of the politics, because politics don't sell. And the people behind Judas and the Black Messiah tried hard to keep the film focused on the politics and not getting sidelined by other stuff. But in the end, the film kinda disappoints. On the one hand, they tried to tell Hampton's story, but only by making an FBI informant the protagonist. That focus alone makes it a film about failure, a kind of a defeatist statement. Now, Oliver Stone made a film about the assassination of John F. Kennedy and somehow managed to make the whole thing into a celebration of truth-seeking and a celebration of Kennedy and all the things he stood for. And you don't really learn anything about Hampton's personal history, his political transformation, any of that. Why? Because the whole thing is structured as a genre film. It's the Black, The Departed. It's about suspense. It's not about political analysis. It's not about contextualization. That's why it was enough to have basically one major villain, J. Edgar Hoover, played like a caricature in weird makeup by Martin Sheen, who looks more like Mussolini than Hoover in this. And Hoover was just a part of COINTELPRO. There's a whole infrastructure behind such political programs and initiatives. It doesn't really help understand the time when you basically have one cartoon villain who's responsible for everything. It's distortion by omission. That's how most Hollywood films operate. They don't have to lie to distort the truth. They just have to ignore certain things. And it's not because producer Ryan Coogler or director Shaka King have evil intent. Far from it. They really tried, but there are structural obstacles. When you work inside the system, you have to adjust to the system. Just look at Oliver Stone after the success of JFK. He thought he can do this all over again. He made Nixon, and it was a huge flop. After that, he couldn't make his MLK movie. He made a neo-noir called U-Turn and a sports drama, Any Given Sunday. If the system is set up for entertainment and distraction, it's very hard to do something else and be successful. So you try to please and appease everybody. And you can be pragmatic about it. You could say, so either there's no film about Fred Hampton, or there's our film about Fred Hampton. It might have its limitations, but it's all we got. And I get that. Still, I think it's my duty to point out that the system is not meant to produce art that enlightens us, and when it does, it's an accident. It's something that slipped through the cracks. It's an after effect. But back to one battle after another. Get rid of the politics, because politics don't sell. Teyana Taylor, the actress playing Perfidia, said in an interview, "I don't look at Perfidia and say, this is Asata's life. These are two women who were unapologetically themselves. They stood 10 toes down on what they believed in. You can't do anything but respect that." Now that's just incredible that is her takeaway. They were both women who were unapologetically themselves. It's not about convictions, it's not about justice, it's about personality, it's about me. It's no wonder they couldn't do her justice. They didn't understand her. They didn't understand the time Assata Shakur lived in. Not because all those Hollywood people are stupid, but because they live in a totally different world, a protected bubble, where the police and the military that they allegedly ridicule protects them from people like Assata Shakur. Taylor also said, "One of my favorite books is Assata, the autobiography. And when me and Paul were discussing Perfidia, that was one of the books that was also on his table." So, just for the record, he knew. He knew her biography. In fact, he read her autobiography. He was inspired by it. And that was his takeaway. A character named Perfidia Beverly Hills. I know, he wanted the name to sound more Pynchonesque, but the Beverly Hills bit, that's all him. Surface, entertainment, glamour, revolutionaries as narcissistic stars, blaxploitation with a corporate feminist touch a la Beyoncé. I'm kinda surprised that the left or the woke left didn't really call him out, because he's a white privileged man talking about issues he clearly knows nothing about or something, and even make his black female characters hypersexualized. Why does he get away with it? But Teyana Taylor was a willing accomplice. And I quote, "I kind of feel like it was a full circle moment. I was just like, oh, this is really dope. And I know exactly where I want to go and what direction I want to go in for Perfidia." Yeah, I know too. The direction is character assassination. And if you don't see that or don't want to see that, that's on you. But back to the hypersexual stuff. So, why did PTA get away with it? In one of the few critical pieces on the film, journalist Alan E. Jones from The Guardian writes, "Anderson went for extreme horniness. This is a choice. Just like it was a choice to name another of his black female revolutionary characters Jungle Pussy, inspired by the performer's real stage name, a sexualized spin on the old racist slur Jungle Bunny. Or to have Perfidia express her principled defiance of the fascistic state with the phrase, 'This pussy don't pop for you.' Note to white male screenwriters, not every black woman talks like Cardi B, and even Cardi B doesn't sound like a Cardi B record all the time." These are choices which indicate that Anderson is unaware of the racist Jezebel trope, which originated during the endemic sexual exploitation of chattel slavery and has been perpetuated by American pop culture in various guises ever since. Either that, or he's expressing a Tarantino-esque overconfidence in his ability to radically repurpose derogatory language and imagery which is not, and never has been, directed at him. That's a good point, by the way. PTA thinks he can get away with it because he's considered a master. But he's just as smug about these things as Quentin Tarantino, who's just obsessed with the N-word. And I used to be more chill about it back in the day, but the way he fetishizes it, and fetishizes just about everything in his films, that's a bit weird. Here's a clip of an old Charlie Rose interview.
"And as a writer, I demand the right to write any character in the world that I want to write. And I demand the right to be them, I demand the right to think them, and I demand to tell the truth as I see they are. All right? And to say that I can't do that because I'm white, but the Hughes brothers can do that because they're black, that is racist. That is the heart of racism. All right? And I do not accept that. All right? If he came out with a statement and said the word nigger was used too much in Menace to Society or The Dead Presidents, then at least I still would completely disagree with it. Because as a writer, I have the right to do any damn thing I have the talent to achieve. All right? And to fail at, too. But to say that, but for him not saying that to them, but saying that to me, that is BS.
I mean, saying something like, "You're the real racist, because you want to take the N-word away from me." Come on. I understand his point, he's a writer, he doesn't want to censor himself, but if that's the end goal of your freedom of expression, that's the thing you want to go to war for, I really don't know if it's about the First Amendment or just about your weird fetish. And the same thing with PTA. I'm not saying he shouldn't write black characters, but it's his choices that are so revealing. The thing is, if you think you're a genius, you don't have to be responsible, because you can't do no wrong. And if people have a problem with you, they just don't get it, or you're ahead of the culture, or whatever. PTA is a good filmmaker and he's a good writer, sometimes, but he would never take any real risk. His goal was to play the game and to master the game. The cringe part about it is that he wants to be a master filmmaker. And he wants to be considered a master filmmaker, which he is, kinda, but he's too self-conscious and not very deep in the end. He reminds me of Quentin Tarantino, he's just less annoying. But I think films like Boogie Nights and One Battle After Another showcase a certain Gen X sensibility, a detachment from its actual subject, an ironic approach, an emphasis on cool, stylized dialogue, pointless idiosyncrasies that you can mistake for artistic signature, and endless references to other movies. These films take place in the pop cultural hall of mirrors, a labyrinth of pop cultural references. And just like Tarantino, PTA needs the big gesture. He needs great actors, or maybe the greatest actors, who have to play unforgettable characters. But what's he actually saying? In the end, art doesn't need meaning. It just needs expression. But what exactly is being expressed? And is that even a good thing? Remember the story Fiona Apple told about Tarantino and PTA? I quote, "Every addict should just get locked in a private movie theater with QT and PTA on coke, and they'll never want to do it again." Apple went on to describe her relationship with Anderson, who directed music videos for her songs while she wrote a rap for his film Magnolia. Though their partnership was creatively collaborative, Apple remembers their relationship as painful and chaotic, characterized by criticism and contempt. Apple described Anderson's temper, recalling how he threw a chair across the room after the 1998 Academy Awards, where Boogie Nights lost Best Original Screenplay. Apple recalled thinking, "Fuck this. This is not a good relationship." Don't worry, Paul. One battle after another will win some Oscars. That's what it was meant to do. Maybe you will win an award as well, so you don't need to throw chairs. One Battle After Another was designed to be an awards movie. Its content will be forgotten eventually, but you will find new ways to make prestige pictures that won't hurt anybody. The revolution will not be televised, Gil Scott-Heron sang, and his song is playing in the end credits of your film. You know what will be televised instead? Awards shows. Thank God. One last thing. PTA went on in The Guardian, defending Scientology. He said, "But isn't George Lucas the founder of a religion too? Absolutely he is. Ideas can take you anywhere." Performative politics can take many forms. You can make a film like One Battle After Another where you're completely disoriented and you don't know when is this taking place, and the politics came basically through 60s iconography and superficial speeches. You can just mess with history. Or you can contextualize the film in a certain time, and by doing that, assume that that's enough. And that's what Kelly Reichardt's The Mastermind did. The plot? In a sedate Massachusetts suburb circa 1970, unemployed family man and amateur art thief J.B. Mooney sets out on his first heist. With a museum cased and accomplices recruited, he has an airtight plan, or so he thinks. Of course, the plan goes wrong. The paintings that he stole get stolen from him by organized crime, and he has to flee the state. Old friends don't want him around, so he tries to escape to Canada, but he gets arrested while taking part in an anti-war protest. A protest he only gets involved in to escape a mugging he participated in. I feel almost bad talking about this because this is a small independent film. I mean, it had its world premiere in Cannes, so it's not that small, but compared to PTA, this is a small film. And it's certainly not that pernicious. It's not a bad film either, but Reichardt thinks she's making a political point while actually doing not that much. Now, this is the Nixon era. Some TV newsreels and radio programs remind us where we're at, approximately. It's an important moment in history, Reichardt tries to tell us. But JB doesn't care. He's too much invested in his own schemes. But they all fail. He's missing out on the political moment and gets caught while he tries to hide from the police and a group of protesters. That's what led to his downfall. And that's it really. And it's not much, to be honest. We don't know why he's so self-absorbed, why he ignores the political landscape, why he doesn't take care of his family. He's just not that interesting after all. And the political lecture falls flat. But there are other things going on. For example, there's exactly one black character, Ronald Gibson, who's basically just a thrill-seeking criminal disruptor who ruins the heist for everybody. His character is introduced as he disrupts a small protest by Moms Against War. And he brings a gun to the whole thing. He threatens some people during the heist and robs a bank afterwards. The police catch him, and he tells them everything. And that's the only black character in the film. I mean, again, it's the choices you make. That's the filmmaker's choice. Another thing is when JB gets caught by the local mafia who takes the paintings away from him, one of the mob guys says, "Honestly, I don't think you have thought this through. Never work with drug addicts, dealers, or wild cards. That kid Gibson, you have to imagine, a kid like that is gonna be running his mouth, bragging to anyone who'll listen." And here's where the film shows its true colors. A mob guy from a small town in the late 60s or early 70s wouldn't call a criminal that happens to be black that kid. You all know what I'm talking about. It's Tarantino's favorite word, the N-word. Now, I'm not saying I want Reichardt to use the N-word more, but the fact that she didn't made me realize that the whole film, as well as One Battle After Another, avoids any real risk. There's no grittiness, there's no controversy, only good taste. Even the problematic black characters won't be verbally insulted. Everyone's nice enough. It's a nice film in good taste. It's tailor-made for a film festival audience. No cussing, no swearing, no violence, no misogyny. Instead, you have melancholic vibes, some light political context, not too complicated though. You have smart women who suffer from having to deal with stupid men. You have some humor and a really great jazz score, I have to say. It's the best thing about the film, for me. It's a film that will not offend anybody. A film that ostensibly tries to say something meaningful without saying too much, but ends up saying nothing really. It's not enough to show some protests and show us Nixon on television. That doesn't mean anything. And the fact that JB gets punished in the end for being apolitical or ignorant or whatever, it's not a political statement. It's performative. One Battle After Another and The Mastermind are both films designed for their target audience. They're both designed not to offend. Okay, maybe the right wing, but their rage is performative as well. They're both designed not to go too far. They're both designed to win some awards. And that's enough for a lot of people to call these films masterpieces. One of those films was made by a Hollywood darling. The other was made by an indie darling. Both know how to play the game, how to win awards, how to play it safe, and how to get away with it over and over again. You might have a good time watching those two films, and I get that. They're not bad, both are very well made, and you might enjoy them. But what will remain of these films after the PR machinery died down, and after the last article about PTA has been written? And there are filmmakers who take risks. Look at Ari Aster. He made 2 very successful horror films. He could have easily become the next, I don't know, Osgood Perkins. But instead, he chose 2 very different projects after Midsummer. And especially Eddington, his last film, was a very divisive, polarizing film, trying to make sense of the present. PTA doesn't try to do that. He tries to win an Oscar. He's been trying since 1998, maybe earlier. He wants to work with stars. He worked with Leo. He worked with Daniel Day-Lewis, who is considered one of the greatest actors of his generation. He worked with Tom Cruise, and he still wants to work with him, being sour that he wasn't asked to make a Mission Impossible movie. PTA has been nominated for 14 Academy Awards and never won a single one. That must have hurt. How many chairs does he have to throw until they finally give him one? I think he will win an Academy Award for Best Director this year. It's time. I mean, they gave Scorsese one for one of his weaker films. And the competition this year, it's pretty weak, so... And they might give Tiana Taylor an Oscar. Remember, Denzel Washington, he won an Academy Award, not for playing Malcolm X, but for playing a corrupt cop in Training Day.